Are the Pelicans in New Orleans long-term? Is the Smoothie King Center getting replaced or renovated? We have updates on the situation in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans at NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Tuesday, and we've got updates on the Smoothie King Center, the Pelicans lease, and just the long-term vision here, as said by Gayle, Benson the other day. So we're going to give you the updates on that, and it actually sounds kind of exciting, and you should feel pretty good about where this is heading. Then we're going to look at two roster moves the Pelicans have made, waiving two players, which gives us insight into maybe the final roster spot and what they're going to do there. And then also, y'all hear that? That's national media kind of shifting their opinions a little bit on the New Orleans Pelicans. That's for one reason, and I'll tell you what that is in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everyday. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And don't forget, you can also watch Locked On Pelicans on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Same place you watch your Pelicans play. So let's get into the big news. And that has to do with the Smoothie King Center and the Pelicans' long-term future and what that's all going to look like. On Thursday, October 2nd, the Saints signed a lease for the Superdome, locking the team in long-term. Lease is one of the most important things you can have. You have a long-term lease in place with a building, some place to play. You can't really get out of it. It's what keeps a team from relocating in a city, more so than anything else. It's the biggest legal hurdle at the very least. And not that we were worried about the Saints leaving or even the Pelicans leaving. Truthfully, once you talk to people within the building and you hear that Gayle Benson is committed to both these teams being in New Orleans, it's really as simple as that. But the lease is still a good thing and adds some just peace of mind when it comes to it. So the Saints signed theirs. So the big question then becomes, what about the New Orleans Pelicans? Their lease in the Smoothie King Center ends in 2029, mid-2029. I think it's June 30th, 2029. That's like 4 years away. That's going to be here before you know it. But at the Superdome lease signing, here's what Gayle Benson said, quote, she turned and looked back at Governor Jeff Landry and said, quote, I may as well ask, are you ready to start on the arena? And while I'm asking you, we should also make Champion Square one of the best downtown entertainment districts, and it really should be the country because I think that's where we're going. And I'm really ready to start. Let's do this on Monday, end quote, right? Basically what that is saying here is now that the lease for the Saints is done, they can turn their focus to the Smoothie King Center and the Pelicans. All eyes are on this now. And I can tell you from talking to people with the team, this is not one of those situations where it's like, let's take a breather and we'll get this done in a month or we'll reconvene in January or something along those lines. This is them getting started literally on it immediately from my understanding on this. 2029 is going to be here before we know it. The team understands that too, and they want to lock this in. So the update here is they are actively working on the future lease for the Pelicans right now. But that's where things get a little bit interesting, I think. How will the NBA feel about the Pelicans playing in the Smoothie King Center? It's 25 years old, essentially. It's been reported by Christian Clark with the NOLA.com Times-Picayune previously, in a quote that he got from Adam Silver, that Silver and the NBA want to see each team in a state-of-the-art arena. That makes sense. More state-of-the-art arenas means higher prices, truthfully. It means more options for revenue, things like that. That all gets split. That's called BRI. It factors into the salary cap and other things. It just means more money for everybody, more money for the players, more money for ownership, more money for the league. Everyone benefits from that. That's why they want everyone in a big state-of-the-art fancy arena. It's to make more money here. So I get it, truthfully, right? The Smoothie King Center, they've done a survey on it, and a lot of it needs some renovation. That's putting it mildly. A lot of the facilities kind of are at the end of their lifespan, I believe is what the quote was from what Christian Clark saw of everything. So they need to renovate it, and how much can be renovated with it? That's kind of the open question. If the Smoothie King Center doesn't get renovated, how is the NBA going to feel about this? Now, I don't think the Benson organization, the Pelicans, would enter into lease negotiations and figuring that out if they knew that, if they were concerned that the NBA would approve anything. So I'm less concerned about that, truthfully, because that makes no sense otherwise. But also go back to that quote from Gayle Benson. Quote, "And while I'm asking you, I think we should also make Champion Square one of the best downtown entertainment districts, and it really should be in the country." End quote, right? You can start to see the long-term vision, the long-term plan here. It's not just the Smoothie King Center, but a big, larger kind of overhaul that maybe they want to do. An entertainment district is a great idea. That's how you create a world-class experience. It's not just the arena, but it's what's around it. Are your parking facilities nice? Do you have food options, entertainment options? After a big Pelicans win, how much fun would it be to pop out of the arena and just walk right into a bar or restaurant and celebrate with other fans? Go meet up with friends before the game, then go into the arena. You have some of this now downtown, but you've got a little bit of a walk. You know, it's not a place that you might go with a big group, something, you have a couple restaurants there, but it's not an overall cohesive plan. And this is what it sounds like they're trying to do. That's me just reading between the lines of her quote. That's not sourced or anything like that. I do think, though, they want to create a world-class experience. That can probably help a little bit with some of, a lack of renovations from the Smoothie King Center. I like the Smoothie King Center. It's an easy place just to go watch a game, grab a beer, sit in your seats. The sight lines are good, but it does need updating. The lower bowl is maybe the lowest or one of the lowest in the NBA. You could upgrade the food, things like that. There's easy, quick fixes for them to do, but then there's other things that are a little bit tougher because the footprint is just kind of constrained where it is. So these are the type of things that might potentially delay it, but I think it's safe to say that they are actively working on all of this and trying to bring, as I said, a world-class experience to Pelicans fans in the city of New Orleans. That's how you're going to attract, the convention crowd going to games. That's going to generate revenue, all of that. It sounds like they are actively working on this right now. When I talked over the summer about rumors, the team moving, all that, you don't need to worry about that. The lease is important, don't get me wrong, but this team's in no danger of moving. Gayle Benson has a very clear commitment to keeping the team here. She said that in public. There's no reason to doubt it whatsoever. If she wanted to sell the team, she could have sold the team by now. NBA teams are going for record profits. You don't need to wait until expansion, right? You might get a big check or something along those lines, but you just price that into any future purchase. Anyone selling a team is factoring in, and that price is going up because of future expansion. You can get that money now, actually, which is better than waiting for a check, then selling the team. So would make more sense to sell it sooner rather than later. But you don't need to worry about any of that. That's not happening here. So if she wanted to sell it, she would have done it by now. The Pelicans are staying in New Orleans long term. I feel very confident in saying that. And I think we'll see over the next couple months updates when it comes to the Smoothie King Center, the negotiations. But that is something that they are working on. Like, they turned their attention to that. As Gayle Benson said, let's do this on Monday. I think they started basically this week looking at all of that. So they're actively on it. Expect more updates on that in the future. We got some updates on the Pelicans roster. 2 players waived. What's it tell us about the final roster spot? Let's look at that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and you're going to get $300 in bonus bets if you win. All you got to do, pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you're going to unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And I love FanDuel because it gives you so many different ways to play. You can build parlays, get that bigger payout. You like the player props because you have a guy that you think is going to go off? Absolutely. You can even follow the lines live during games when you see momentum is shifting. When you knew the Saints were going to get that win, That -1.5, you can jump on those lines after kickoff and still get in on the action. So it just makes watching football a little bit more exciting when you've got something riding on the action. So don't wait anymore. Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. And if your first $5 bet wins as a new customer, you are going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app over at FanDuel.com. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube. Sorry, 12,000 now. We jumped up. 12,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. If you're still listening from Australia, I appreciate you. If you're not an everydayer, that's okay too. I appreciate you making Locked On Pelicans part of your day. If you listen one day a week, try listening twice. Add one more day than you're currently listening to, because we've got coverage you're not going to get anywhere else. Insight you're not going to get anywhere else. Tomorrow, we're going to do the Jeremiah Fears show. I've had time to kind of parse through the data, plan it out a little bit. I want to look at what to expect from his rookie year. Should we have high expectations, medium expectations, low expectations? You're not going to want to miss this show. Just watch tomorrow's show to learn more about Jeremiah Fears here, because I think I have an idea of what he's going to be able to contribute and what we should expect from him. So the Pelicans made 2 roster moves the other day here. They have 21 players going into training camp and the Australia trip, and they just waived 2 of them, waiving Garrison Brooks and Jalen McDaniels. Garrison Brooks was a 6'10 center who played for Mississippi State, played in Europe last year too, was signed to the training camp here. You also had Jalen McDaniels, who's got a little bit of NBA experience too in spots here and there, 6'9" wing player forward. Both have been waived. So the Pelicans roster now stands at 19. They have an open roster spot. They have an open regular season roster spot that they could put somebody onto. And so we've seen them sign a number of players that they're just kind of trying out for. And I think this has been actually like a smart move. It's the idea of like iron sharpens iron here. If you bring in a bunch of hungry young guys trying to claim that final roster spot, and they're going up against Zion Williamson, Trey, Herb, and the rest of the group in practices, that's a good way to make those other players just be sharp. Those guys are going to bring it. Garrison Brooks wants to be on an NBA roster. Jalen McDaniels wants to be on an NBA roster. Jaden Springer is the other name that they brought in, a guard who played with the Boston Celtics and other teams previously. He wants to be on an NBA roster, right? Christian Shoemate wants to be on an NBA roster. All of those guys are going to go really tough, hard in practice, in training camp. And so I like the idea of kind of, even if it's a little bit mean, dangling that open roster spot. And if someone impresses you, you can sign them to it. Not, you waive all the people and you got some valuable practice time from those guys to hopefully make your other players improve. But they did waive 2 big men, which I think is kind of interesting here. Garrison Brooks at 6'10", Jalen McDaniels at 6'9". Those are 2 tall dudes. You know, I think they're starting to feel pretty good about the front court rotation here. You know, when you look at how Kevon Looney started, kind of does all the right things. We talked about the battle for the center position in yesterday's show. Looney is a good defensive rebounder, particularly for his size. Having somebody like that's important. And then Messi has shown a lot of growth. And at 6'11", he presents even better size. And if he can become a good defensive rebounder, there's some shot blocking potential from him, but also the potential to be just a very skilled offensive center. I highlighted the playmaking that he had in that second game against Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, and he looked great. Playmaking out of the pick and roll, short roll situations, playmaking in transition, which is really good too, making the right read. That's encouraging growth from Messi. You know, when you factor in a healthy Zion Williamson, you saw a good run for someone like Karlo Makovic there too. Well, on paper, this is maybe one of the worst center rotations in the league. Makovic can play power forward center, though I think he's more of a power forward than he is a center. You could argue it's the worst one in the league. It certainly on paper looks that way, but all of a sudden, I think you're feeling a little bit better and the Pelicans are feeling a little bit better about this. I'm going to sneeze here. We got the sneeze button down on the show here. Apologies for that. So, you know, they feel good, I think, about this. You don't waive a 6'10" guy that could provide valuable depth to this team when you kind of need that. You also have Hunter Dickinson, a 7'1" center who you've signed to a two-way to provide some of that too. So you do have a little bit of insurance, a guy you could at least try and develop, grow, all of the things. But this does give you an idea of maybe how the Pelicans are feeling a little bit when it comes to their rotation. The other thing is, I don't expect the final roster spot to go to Jaden Springer. It's just, it doesn't seem like it makes that much sense to me here. I think they're going to go into the season, and I think they should go into the season with an open roster spots. I'm trying to pull up the cap sheet right now. It's the wrong button. They should go into the season with, the open roster spot. They're about $4.2 million from the luxury tax right now. If you were to sign a player, even on a non-guaranteed deal, for $2 million is what the veteran minimum, let's call it, would be for a player like that. Let me see what Jaden Springer's contract, doesn't show it, what his contract would be here because it's on an unguaranteed deal. That's the type of player that I just don't think you really need to use on the team. I don't know what he would bring, to the roster. He can be a decent defender. He can be a high flyer at times. We don't know the status of Jose Alvarado, so maybe another guard makes some sense there. However, you'd rather just give those minutes to Jeremiah Fears. To me, it's really as simple as that. And so if you sign a guy to a $2 million deal, you're looking at $2.2 million to the luxury tax threshold, which I think is going to be the type of thing that, really limits what you can do at the trade deadline if he's on the roster. They're going to look to make moves. We feel pretty confident in that, I think, that they're going to look to do things. Having that open roster spot means you can do an unbalanced trade where you take two players back, send one out. There's something useful in that. Then you don't need to waive a player and just eat some money. It just gives you more flexibility to the luxury tax line, which I think is important. This team likely isn't going to pay the luxury tax this year. So having that flexibility and prioritizing that is a rather important thing. You've heard me talk about the two timelines if you're an everydayer, and that the team is eventually going to need to kind of make a decision. Are we kind of building for youth, or are we being competitive? Because those two things can be a problem. And when you don't have your future first round pick, while Joe Dumars, while Willie Green are not saying it's like playoffs or bust for us, it's still kind of playoffs or bust. So they're likely going to make a move to improve the roster in some capacity. If you do that, you might need to take on a contract you don't necessarily want, and having more room to the luxury tax line is going to help you do that. The last thing you would want to see is this team not making a trade that could improve the roster because it would put them in the luxury tax by like $1 million, $2 million, let's say. And then they're like, yeah, well, we're going to be improved. It's not worth that. And that's a big thing. The luxury tax swing, when you think about it, is about $20 million for this franchise. If you stay out of the luxury tax, you're going to get a check for $15 million, essentially, somewhere in that range. Whereas if you go into the luxury tax, not only do you not get that $15 million, but now you've got to pay the salary of the player and then whatever the luxury tax payment's going to be. So call it $5 million or so. That's not where they want to be, right? That's a $20 million swing. That's pretty significant from where they are right now. And if your ceiling is still the 8th seed, no, you don't need to pay the luxury tax. There will be a time, hopefully soon, when the team does need to pay it. Okay, I agree with that. But looking at this through the lens of what's realistic, right? It's not my money. Pay it every year. I don't care. But when you're looking at actually balancing your books, being in a small market, having some of the limitations, and what we're doing is looking at this through the lens of how the Pelicans will act, not how we wish they would act if this was 2K or something like that. It's how are they actually going to act? If they're going to pick and choose 1-2 times in the future to pay the luxury tax, it probably shouldn't be this year. So don't kind of waste it this year if you've only got one or two, it's like 1 or 2 bullets here and you got them in your back pocket. Don't waste it on something you don't need. That's kind of how I view the luxury tax stuff when it comes to this team here. So I think they should keep that roster spot open, give them more flexibility. In the fan survey we did, it was like, what should the Pelicans prioritize this year? Adding a center, adding more shooting. I would have said center. Now I feel less about that. Basically, it was like a runaway of, prioritize flexibility because you don't know what you're going to look like just yet. The team's bad and you need to trade off pieces. It's better to do that. right? You can then take bad contract. You can trade a good player for bad contracts and a bunch of picks or something like that. You need the flexibility to do that. Having that is a rather important thing. So I think they should not use this roster spot. If it were to be anyone right now, you would say it would be Jaden Springer, but I don't think it's going to be anybody. But you never know. Maybe he surprises. We're getting into preseason in about a week or so where they're going to be playing NBA teams. That's going to be an important thing. We can reevaluate it then because there's no need to kind of rush to judgment on this. But this is the Pelicans starting to give more guys a shot, whittle down the roster a little bit. This is a natural progression. Those are the roster updates. Do you think they should leave the roster spot open? Do you think they should sign Jaden Springer? Is there someone out there in free agency you want to see them sign? Russell Westbrook, somebody else? Let me know in the comments down below on YouTube. So coming up next, you hear that? It's national media just slightly changing their tune. I'll explain why. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what's in those accounts. So whether it's your 401k, property, retirement, investments, when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. So that's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. And Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch's for you. It kind of just does all the heavy lifting. You can link all your accounts in minutes. You can see clear data visuals, and you get smart categorization of your spending, and you finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. So you can identify that you're not saving as much for retirement, or you have the ability to even save more for retirement than you realized. Maybe you're saving up for a home and it's going to show you how much money you can reasonably put aside. It just makes it easy. What I also love is if you're managing your money with a partner, I don't know, planning a wedding, trying to pay for all that, making sure you're on the same page, Monarch really makes it easy so you can both achieve your financial goals. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the crack. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNBA. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join over, I got to get used to this, 12,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And you can also watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every weekday at 10:30 a.m. Going to be there all season long, so you'll be able to just leave the channel on when you watch the game at night. Just turn on your TV at 10:30 and boom, you got the recap show and everything you need coming up every single weekday. It's awesome that we're on there where the Pelicans play. For your second listen, go find Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Josh Lloyd hosts the #1 fantasy basketball podcast, giving you daily tips and helping you win your league, all while making you a smarter NBA fan. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Final thing in today's show, I noticed this over the weekend. Zion Williamson looked good, right? Like Zion just looked good. He kind of, I said going into that, these games were less about the actual play on the stats and winning and all that, right? It was more, does this team pass the eye test? And guess what? This team sure as heck passed the eye test, I think. People are starting to I don't want to say come around on the team right now, but they're like, oh, there may be something there. You heard Patrick Beverley say, everyone is sleeping on the Pelicans, which my friend Alex Harari had a great joke here of, yeah, everyone was sleeping on them because they were playing at 4:30 in the morning when everyone was sleeping, except all y'all were watching. Tons of people were watching the Locked On, or not the Locked On, you were doing that too, but watching the game. You saw national media see Zion Williamson and start to believe it. You heard Brian Windhorst on ESPN the other day say, cool, show it with actions, not just words. Him showing up on the court and looking as spry as we've ever seen him when he went for that steal, saved the ball from going out of bounds and did that behind the back, just beautiful pass to Sadiq Bey, who then hit Jeremiah Fears in transition for a dunk, was eye-opening to a lot of folks. Seeing Zion Williamson just look 5-10% quicker than what we've seen from him before is an encouraging thing. Seeing Zion Williamson say things like, it feels good to feel good, when maybe he hadn't been doing all that before, that's encouraging. And people are like, yeah, I don't know what to make of this team exactly because I still don't want to believe in Zion Williamson, but people are starting to change their mind. Matt Moore, I love this guy, at HP Basketball on Twitter, host of Locked On Nuggets, one of the Locked On NBA hosts as well, in the Action Network. He's one of my favorite NBA follows. I think very highly of his opinion. He, even said when he was like kind of projecting the West, he had the Pelicans at 14 out of 15. And he's like, but they're doing something to me, right? There's a feeling from people around the league right now that like maybe there's a little bit more to the Pelicans than what we were thinking of before. That's change, right? Like that's something that we didn't have the other day when everyone was down on this team. And while maybe they still don't like the Derek Queen trade, maybe they don't think Jeremiah Fears will contribute his rookie year. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Zion Williamson is the key thing. If Zion Williamson is healthy all year long and plays like an all-NBA player, it's gonna do a lot here. Sometimes it's as simple as that. I don't want to like give away the secret to doing my show and let you all try and take my job here. But when you look at like teams in the West, Zion makes a difference here. I was looking at Good Morning, It's Basketball by Tom Ziller, a newsletter I love here, when he's kind of breaking down the tiers. Tier 4 play-in mix here. New Orleans Pelicans wrote a recent piece on them. Quote, a healthy Zion Williamson is an all-NBA player. That's worth a lot of wins. There are a ridiculous number of questions, but there's a platform for quality basketball here, right? People realize how valuable and good Zion Williamson can be, and him showing up in shape, saying all the right things, playing well, is starting to change people's opinions. I'd be willing to bet as we get towards the start of the season, assuming he stays healthy, knock on wood here, that tune will change. There could be something brewing here. We'll find out more. We're going to be covering it all season long here on the Locked On Pelicans podcast, and that's going to do it for today's episode. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Be back with y'all for Jeremiah Fears show tomorrow. See y'all next time.